Joining me now is somebody who kind of puts that whole idea of the countryside and foraging on its head. Emily Smith is an urban forager. And where does she live? Peckham in London. And she's joining me now to talk about the wealth of foods you can find in public parks, on sports fields, in the long grass, on the pavement, and in between the cracks in hard landscaping, in gardens and ornamental parks, etc., etc. Who knew? And what the hell kind of food can you find in those areas? Joining me now is Emily. Emily, thank you so much for joining me. I'm fascinated by this because I was absolutely one of those people who thought of foraging in the woods and the wilds and what have you. But you managed to do it in Peckham. I think you've got some foods to show us that you've actually managed to forest in an urban setting.
Trisha, thank you for having me here. And you're right, there is so much available that actually can be found in an urban setting. So here I've got some food that I foraged. It's all fungi that I foraged in the past couple of days. So
wow.
I'll try and tip my basket so you can see it.
Wow. So tell me, what have you got there and where did you get it?
So I won't give you the exact locations of the specific.
What sort of place? What sort of place was it in the park?
So this is a clump of oyster mushrooms. So it's very familiar to a lot of people nowadays. People use it as a meat substitute. It's very, very delicious. So this was growing on a tree in a woodlanded area not too far from me. And then we have these, which are called wood ears or jelly ears. They actually really look like ears. They're very popular in Asian cuisine, in many Chinese and Japanese dishes they feature. These were growing on trees very, very close to my house. These actually grow all through winter. So they're an amazing source of food and nutrition during the colder winter months. We have some winter chanterelles. So these I foraged near my parents' house. My parents live in Kent, so I went to visit them, and these were foraged on Christmas Day, and they're still in good condition. And these were also foraged on Christmas Day. They're a hedgehog mushroom, and this is a medicinal mushroom. It's called turkey tail, and it's been proven in studies. It's called turkey tail because it looks like the feathers.
Doesn't it look like it? Doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Is that from a tree? I'm sure I've seen those on trees.
Yes, so these grow on tree stumps, and they have a doppelganger. As with many of these mushrooms, they do potentially have lookalikes, so you have to make sure that you're foraging the correct mushroom before consuming it. But these mushrooms, you can tell by the pores on the back of them that they are turkey tail, and they have actually been proven in studies to be a cancer preventative, and they're actually treatment for cancer in places like Japan. And so they're an ancient medicine, but it's only nowadays that really the Western world are kind of catching up on the amazing healing nature of fungi.
So you must have to really know what you're picking, though. I mean, and as you pointed out, there are subtle differences. You've got to know your stuff.
Yes, there's a combination of things. So I really advocate for people to slow down and notice the plants, the fungi growing in between the cracks. Even in sterile environments like Tottenham Court Road, you will see these. I'm not suggesting that people actually forage them. So there's a difference between actually kind of connecting and realizing there's nature all around us. We're a part of nature. And then also using your brain about whether this is a polluted area. Maybe there's a bit of dog wee. Every instance is a case-by-case basis that you have to kind of do a dynamic risk assessment on the plant. But there are so many amazing things available, and people don't really know until they take the time to kind of learn. But yes, it is very important that you never eat anything that you don't know what it is, because it's dangerous.
Yeah. And is it just mushrooms and fungi, or are there other things? I remember a dear friend of mine pointing out, and it's probably the only one I can recognize, and that's wild garlic. But what other things can you find? And wild garlic was in the woods, lining just the street in the long grass and things like that. What other things can you find that aren't mushrooms?
So I like to base a lot of my diet around wild food and around the seasons. So there's nuts and berries. There's also roots that you can harvest to get carbohydrates. You do have
what
to
sort
get...
of roots? What sort of roots?
For example, burdock. So that's an amazing plant which has a long history in the UK, but in places like Japan, it's actually eaten as commonly as potatoes for us. So in gobo in Japan features on many a table all the time. You just have to make sure that you have the landowner's permission when harvesting roots, because you're not allowed to dig in public places.
But then you must have to recognise, I mean, how do you know that burdock is there? I'm guessing it has some sort of thing growing like carrots or up above the ground that you need to recognise and think, aha.
Yes, and with all of these plants, there are the plants that are easier for beginners to start foraging or start recognising. So I always advocate for people to start at the beginning and build up some kind of confidence when it comes to identifying plants. It's also about learning whether there are poisonous lookalikes. So when you're foraging something like wild garlic, it's a great family for people to start off sustainably foraging that, because it's in the allium family and it's very easy to identify it via its smell. So all the members of the allium family stink like garlic or onion, and they're all edible. So there are actually lots of other wild garlic alternatives that I use. 2 of them actually grow during winter. They grow really close to my house in Peckham. So I have an access of a very similar, I actually prefer it to wild garlic. It's called 3-cornered leek. You can use it raw, you can use it like chives. And there's also crow garlic, which is very similar to chives. You would not be able to tell them apart. And so you can use that all through winter on top of your food, and it adds that amazing garlic flavour.
Wow. And you've got, I know, because I know the area, one of my kids lives around there, you've got Nunhead Cemetery. And I'm guessing that cemeteries are really good places when they're really, really old cemeteries. I'm talking about historic ones like Nunhead, because they've got all of that, those wild grasses and those trees there. Are places like, I mean, you've got to be mindful of the law, but I'm thinking the old graveyards and the cemeteries, I know it sounds macabre, but they often have really lush, beautiful woodlands and grass around them, don't they?
You're completely right. In London, we're so lucky to have the ring road of Victorian cemeteries, and many of them have become nature reserves. So Nunhead Cemetery, as you said, it's a beautifully diverse area. You can hear birds singing, but there is a discourse as to whether the old cemetery tombs might have a build-up of mercury or lead. I think everything is in moderation. I think that I'm not going to tell anyone not to forage from cemeteries. I think that you have to kind of weigh things up. In my opinion, a lot of the pesticides that are being put on our crops are probably far worse than the occasional blackberry here. But everyone has to make their own assessment. And I think gathering things from all different places is really beneficial. And I love those wild spaces, and I'm very appreciative of them in South London.
Fascinating. Thank you so much. Wow, who knew? Emily Smith there, Urban Forager. It just makes you, when you go out for a walk again, it kind of opens your eyes, doesn't it?